Hello, my name is William, and welcome to Dragon X Dominion, a realm where dragon legends are forged in fire, honor, and forgotten worlds. I will be your narrator and guide through these epic lands. If you crave powerful stories, legendary dragons, and wars that echo through eternity, then you found your home, ladies and gentlemen. So like, subscribe, and claim your place among these legends.
The desert wind howled across the empty wasteland of Thalrose IV, carrying red dust through the skeletal remains of what used to be a dragon nesting ground. Dr. Amelia Grant knelt beside a cracked stone formation, her gloved hands brushing away centuries of debris. Her team had been studying this abandoned site for 3 weeks, documenting the mysterious disappearance of an entire dragon colony that vanished without explanation 200 years ago. Something pale caught her eye between two rocks. Amelia pulled away more rubble and gasped. An egg. A dragon egg covered in a web of fine cracks like shattered glass. She called her assistant over, and together they carefully extracted it from its hiding place. "It's dead," her assistant said, shaking his head. "Look at those cracks. Been here for decades, maybe centuries." Amelia held the egg close to her chest anyway. It felt wrong to leave it here in this graveyard of broken shells and scattered bones. Against every protocol in her research manual, she carried it back to their small habitat station at the edge of the survey zone. Her 7-year-old daughter Lily was drawing pictures at the kitchen table when Amelia arrived. The girl's eyes went wide at the sight of the pale blue egg. "Is that a dragon egg? Can we keep it?" "It's not alive, sweetheart. I just wanted to study it properly before we catalog it." Amelia placed the egg in a specialized container meant for artifact preservation. She set the temperature controls and went to file her daily report. 3 days later, a sound woke her in the middle of the night, a soft tapping like fingernails on glass. Amelia stumbled out of bed and followed the noise to her lab. The egg was moving. Small pieces of shell fell away as something inside pushed outward. She watched in stunned silence as a tiny snout broke through, followed by a scaled head no bigger than her fist. The hatchling tumbled out onto the padded surface, wet and trembling. Its eyes opened, deep violet in color, and locked onto Amelia's face. The baby dragon made a chirping sound and crawled toward her. Amelia knew she should call the authorities immediately. Dragon births were rare and heavily monitored by the Galactic Council. But something made her hesitate. The little creature seemed so fragile, so alone. She wrapped it in a warm towel and held it close. By morning, Lily had discovered their new guest and promptly named him Scales. The name was simple and obvious, but it stuck. Scales refused to leave Lily's side, following her around the habitat on wobbly legs, chirping whenever she moved too far away. When Amelia finally reported the hatching, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Ambassador Wyranth arrived with a full dragon delegation. The ambassador was an imposing figure, easily 3 times the size of a human, with dark red scales that gleamed like polished metal. "The hatchling must be returned to dragon territory immediately," Wyranth announced, his voice deep and resonant. "It requires proper education in our ways." Amelia nodded and gently picked up Scales, who had been napping in Lily's lap. The moment she tried to hand him to Wyranth, Scales began shrieking. The sound was piercing and distressed. He writhed in her arms, desperate to get away from the adult dragon. When Wyranth reached for him, Scales breathed a tiny jet of flame in panic. The ambassador pulled back, surprised. They tried several more times over the next hour. Each attempt ended the same way. Scales would become hysterical, thrashing and crying until he was back with Amelia or Lily. Finally, he buried his face against Lily's shoulder and refused to look at any of the dragon officials. "This is highly irregular," Wyranth said, his tail lashing in frustration. "The hatchling has clearly imprinted on you. This should not be possible." "What does that mean?" Amelia asked. "It means he believes you are his family, his mother." Wyranth's tone suggested this was somehow shameful. "Dragons do not imprint on other species, ever." A lengthy debate followed. The Galactic Council was called in. After reviewing the situation, they made an unprecedented ruling. Amelia would be granted temporary custody of Scales under strict supervision. Dragon observers would monitor his development. The arrangement would be reviewed every 6 months. Wyranth clearly disagreed with the decision, but accepted it with barely concealed anger. Before leaving, he warned Amelia about the responsibility she had taken on. Dragons are not pets, Dr. Grant. We are an ancient and powerful race. This hatchling will grow to be larger than your habitat, stronger than any human. Do not forget what he truly is. After the delegation departed, Amelia sat on the floor with Lily and Scales. The little dragon was already nearly twice the size he had been at hatching, growing at a rate that shocked her. He looked up at her with those intelligent violet eyes and made a soft cooing sound. Lily hugged him gently. "Don't worry, Scales, you're part of our family now." Amelia hoped she had made the right choice. She had no idea how to raise a dragon, but as Scales curled up between them, his tiny claws gripping her hand with surprising gentleness, she knew she would figure it out somehow. This strange little creature had chosen them, and they would not abandon him. Outside, the desert wind continued to blow across the ancient ruins, carrying with it the dust of civilizations long gone and the seeds of something entirely new. 6 months passed like water through cupped hands. Scales had grown from a hatchling the size of a cat into a creature as large as a pony. His violet eyes had deepened in color, and his pale blue scales now shimmered with hints of silver when the light hit them just right. He moved through the expanded habitat with surprising grace for something so big, careful never to knock over furniture or step on anything fragile. Every night followed the same comfortable routine. Lily would climb into bed with a stack of books, and Scales would curl his long body around her sleeping platform, his massive head resting near her pillow. She read to him for hours, fairy tales about brave knights and kind princesses, legends of heroes who sacrificed everything to save others, stories of friendship that lasted beyond death. Scales absorbed every word. He would ask questions that made Amelia pause in her research. Why did the knight give his life for the village? They were not his clutchmates. What is this thing called forgiveness? Why would the prince forgive the one who hurt him? This character helps a stranger. Why? What does she gain? These questions troubled the dragon observers who lived in the adjacent research station. Amelia often saw them watching through the windows, their expressions unreadable but clearly concerned. Their reports back to the dragon homeworld grew more urgent with each passing week. One evening, Ambassador Wyranth returned, this time with 2 elder dragons she had not met before. They stood in her common area, their bulk making the space feel cramped and small. "Dr. Grant, we have reviewed the reports about your ward's development," Wyranth began, his tone formal and cold. "The hatchling is being exposed to dangerous concepts." "Dangerous?" Amelia felt her temper rise. "He's learning stories. Every child needs stories." One of the elders, an ancient female with scars across her snout, spoke up. "Human stories teach weakness, compassion for the unworthy, sacrifice for those who have no value. These concepts have no place in dragon culture." "Maybe they should," Amelia shot back. She regretted the words immediately, but they were out now. The room went silent, the elder's eyes narrowed to slits. "You dare suggest our culture is lacking? Humans have existed for mere moments compared to our civilization. We ruled the stars when your species was learning to make fire." Wyranth stepped forward, clearly trying to prevent an escalation. "The point is that the hatchling must learn proper dragon values, strength through dominance, success through competition, loyalty only to those who earn it. Your stories contradict everything we are." Amelia took a deep breath. Scales is happy, he's healthy, he's learning and growing. "He is becoming something that is neither human nor dragon," the scarred elder said. "This cannot continue. You will cease all storytelling immediately. No more human literature, no more discussion of your primitive moral philosophies. He will be educated in dragon history and tradition only." After they left, Amelia sat with Lily and explained the new rules. Her daughter's eyes filled with tears. "But he loves the stories. They make him happy." "I know, baby, but we have to follow their orders." Scales had been listening from the doorway. He approached slowly and lowered his head to Lily's level. "It is all right, small friend, I understand." But that night, after Amelia had gone to sleep, Lily crept to Scales' resting area with a book hidden under her shirt. She whispered the words so softly that only his sharp ears could catch them. The story was about a mouse who helped a lion, teaching that even the smallest creature could matter. Scales listened with his eyes closed, committing every word to memory. This became their secret. Every night, Lily would sneak out with a different book. Sometimes it was adventures, sometimes legends, sometimes simple tales about kindness and courage. Scales never forgot a single word. He stored each story in his mind like precious treasure. The dragon observers reported that Scales seemed to be adapting to the new restrictions. He studied dragon history during the day, learning about conquests and territorial expansion, about the rigid hierarchy of their society where the strong ruled and the weak served or died. He gave the correct answers when tested. But inside, the human stories had already taken root. They had shown him a different way of seeing the world. When he watched wounded birds struggle in the desert, he felt something dragons were not supposed to feel. When he saw Amelia comfort Lily after a nightmare, he understood something dragons were never taught. One afternoon, he found an injured sand lizard near the habitat. It had been attacked by a predator and left to die. Scales looked around to make sure no observers were watching, then carefully picked up the small creature and brought it to Amelia. She created a small healing chamber for it, and over the next week, it recovered. The dragon observers never saw this act of mercy. They never knew about the nightly stories. They reported that the human contamination seemed to be fading. They could not have been more wrong. Every tale, every lesson about choosing kindness over cruelty, every example of someone helping another without expecting reward, was building something inside Scales that dragon culture had tried to breed out of their species over thousands of years. He was learning that strength did not have to mean dominance. That power could be used to protect instead of conquer. That caring for the weak was not weakness, but perhaps the highest form of strength. As Lily closed her book one night and hugged his massive neck, Scales made a promise to himself. He would remember every story, every lesson, and someday, somehow, he would find a way to share this gift with others like him. The dragon observers thought they were watching a hatchling being properly educated. They had no idea they were witnessing a revolution being born one whispered story at a time. 2 years had changed everything and nothing. Scales now stood taller than the habitat itself, his wingspan wide enough to cast shadows over the entire research station. The Galactic Council's ruling was final. He had reached adolescence and must return to Draconis, the dragon homeworld, for mandatory integration training. No exceptions. The day of departure arrived too quickly. Lily was 9 now, old enough to understand but young enough to cry without shame. She wrapped her arms around Scales' massive foreleg, her face pressed against his scales. "You'll forget about us," she whispered. Scales lowered his head until his nose touched her forehead. "I could forget how to fly before I forget you. Every story you told me is written in my heart. I will carry them all with me." Amelia tried to stay professional, but her voice cracked when she spoke. "Remember who you are, Scales, not what they tell you to be." The transport ship that came for him was purely dragon-made, all sharp angles and dark metal. Ambassador Wyranth supervised the loading personally, his expression satisfied. He had won. The human experiment was over. As the ship lifted off, Scales watched through the viewport until the research station became a tiny speck, then nothing at all. He was heading toward a world he had never seen, to meet beings who shared his species but nothing else. Draconis was a planet of black stone and red skies. Active volcanoes dotted the landscape, and the air tasted of sulfur and ash. The integration center was built into the side of a massive mountain, carved from living rock over thousands of years. Scales was assigned to a training group with 15 other adolescent dragons. They sized him up immediately. Dragon society operated on clear hierarchies, and every interaction was a test of dominance. The largest of the group, a crimson dragon named Talon, approached Scales on the first day. "You're the human-raised freak," Talon said, not bothering to hide his contempt. "I can smell their weakness on you." Scales said nothing. He had learned from stories that sometimes silence was stronger than words. Talon took this as submission and shoved Scales hard enough to make him stumble. The other young dragons laughed. It was expected, natural. The strong dominated the weak. That was the dragon way. Training was brutal and unforgiving. They learned combat, territorial defense, and the complex social rules that governed dragon interaction. Instructors praised aggression and punished hesitation. When 2 dragons fought over food, the instructors encouraged it. The winner ate well. The loser went hungry. Scales tried to fit in. He really did. But everything felt wrong. During sparring matches, he pulled his strikes. When others were injured, he felt concern instead of satisfaction. When instructors talked about conquered species and subjugated worlds with pride, Scales felt something twist in his stomach. The other dragons noticed his reluctance. They saw it as weakness. One evening, after a particularly harsh training session, Scales found a smaller dragon hiding behind the sleeping quarters. His name was Fang, and his scales were covered in scars from constant fights with larger dragons. He was eating scraps that others had left behind. "You can have mine," Scales said, pushing his portion toward Fang. "I'm not that hungry." Fang stared at him like he had grown a second head. "Why?" "Because you need it more than I do." "That's not how it works. The strong eat first, always." "Maybe it should work differently." Fang looked around nervously, making sure no one was listening. "You really are different. They say you were raised by humans. Is it true they tell stories about helping each other?" Scales felt something spark inside him, someone who wanted to listen. "Yes, would you like to hear one?" That night, hidden from instructors and other dragons, Scales told Fang the story of the mouse and the lion, how the smallest creature saved the mightiest through simple kindness. Fang listened with wide eyes, never interrupting. "That could never happen here," Fang said when the story ended. "Dragons don't help each other like that." "Maybe they could." Word spread quietly among the outcasts and the weak. There was a dragon who knew different stories. Stories where being kind was not the same as being weak, where helping others made you stronger, not weaker, where you did not have to crush everyone around you to matter. Scales began meeting with a small group in secret. He shared every tale Lily had whispered to him. Stories of friendship and sacrifice, of standing up for what was right even when it cost you everything, of finding strength in compassion. The group grew slowly. 5 dragons, then 8, then 12. All of them were outsiders in dragon society. Too small, too scarred, too different. They called themselves the Story Circle, and they met in abandoned caverns deep in the mountain. Elder Scorch, the head instructor, eventually noticed something was wrong. The weak dragons were not acting weak anymore. They helped each other. They shared food. They showed loyalty to each other instead of competing for scraps of approval. He summoned Scales to his chamber. The ancient dragon's eyes glowed like coals in the darkness. "You are spreading poison among the hatchlings," Scorch said, his voice like grinding stone. "Human ideas, human weakness. I should have you exiled for this." "I'm only sharing stories," Scales replied, keeping his voice steady. "Is knowledge a crime?" "Knowledge that undermines our culture is worse than a crime. It is treason." Scorch moved closer, his massive form filling the chamber. "You will stop these meetings. You will stop filling young minds with fantasies about compassion and cooperation, or you will face consequences." Scales met the elder's gaze without flinching. "I will not stop." The declaration hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Scorch's expression shifted from anger to something darker, something dangerous. "Then you have chosen your path, human lover, and it leads only to suffering." 3 years passed, and Scales had become something the dragon elders never anticipated. He stood among the largest and strongest of his generation, his body powerful and his mind sharp. But unlike other adult dragons, he used his strength differently. The story circle had grown beyond anything he imagined. 24 dragons now met in secret, sharing human tales and practicing the strange concepts they taught. They helped each other hunt, sharing kills equally instead of fighting over them. When one was injured, others tended to wounds instead of leaving the weak to suffer alone. They practiced something Scales called kindness, though no word for it existed in the dragon language. Dragon society noticed the change, but could not understand it. Small groups of dragons were cooperating in ways that made no strategic sense. They protected each other without gaining obvious advantage. They wasted energy helping those who could not help them in return. Elder Scorch watched it all with growing fury. He had tried threats, punishment, even isolation. Nothing worked. The ideas spread like fire through dry grass, impossible to contain. Then the mining accident happened. Deep in the northern territories, a massive cavern collapse trapped 73 dragon workers beneath tons of rock. The traditional response was clear and had been followed for thousands of years. Chinese letter the strong and the valuable, leave the weak and injured. The collapse was still unstable. Sending rescue teams risked more lives for dragons who might already be dead or too damaged to be useful. Elder Scorch made the official decision. 12 dragons would be rescued, those known to be strong and in valuable positions. The rest would be left behind. It was logical, it was efficient. It was the Dragon Way. Scales heard about the decision from Fang, who had developed a network of informants sympathetic to their cause. They met in their usual cavern, and for the first time, Scales saw real anger in Fang's scarred face. "They are leaving 61 dragons to die," Fang said. "Some are still alive down there. We can hear them calling for help." The story circle gathered that night, all 24 of them. Scales stood before them, knowing what he was about to propose could get them all killed or exiled. "Humans have a saying," he began. "No one gets left behind. It means that every life has value, not just the strong, not just the useful, everyone." "The elders will stop us," one dragon said nervously. "This is direct defiance." "Then we defy them." Scales spread his wings. "I am going to that collapsed site. I am going to get every dragon out, or I will die trying. Anyone who wants to join me, follow. Anyone who wants to stay safe, I understand." All 24 followed him. They flew through the night, arriving at the collapse site just before dawn. The official rescue team was already working, carefully extracting the chosen 12 dragons. When Scales and his group landed, Elder Scorch was there personally, supervising the operation. "What are you doing here?" Scorch demanded. "Finishing the rescue," Scales replied calmly. "The rescue is finished. The rest are lost. Leave now or face charges of insubordination." Scales looked at the rubble, at the massive pile of broken rock still shifting and groaning. He could hear voices underneath, weak calls for help, dragons who knew they had been abandoned by their own kind. "No," Scales said simply. He moved toward the collapse. Scorch stepped in front of him, flames building in his throat. The official rescue team formed a line, blocking the way. For a moment, it seemed violence was inevitable. Then Fang stepped forward to stand beside Scales. Then another dragon from the story circle. Then another. They formed their own line, facing down their elders. "You would fight your own kind over this?" Scorch asked, disbelief mixing with rage. "We would save our own kind," Scales answered. "All of them." Something passed between them then. A recognition that this was bigger than one rescue, one defiance. This was a challenge to everything dragon society had built over millennia. Scorch stepped aside. Not because he agreed, but because attacking his own kind in front of witnesses would undermine his authority more than letting them try and fail. "You will all die down there," he said, "and I will not risk anyone else to save you." The story circle worked through the day and into the night. They used techniques Scales remembered from human disaster stories. They shored up weak sections before digging. They created air passages to reach trapped dragons before moving heavy stone. They worked in coordinated teams, each dragon using their strengths to support others' weaknesses. It was exhausting, dangerous work. The cavern shifted twice, nearly crushing rescuers, but they kept going. When one dragon tired, another took their place. When someone was injured, others tended to them quickly and got them back to work. By the second day, they had reached the first group of trapped dragons. By the third, they had created a stable passage. By the fourth, all 61 trapped dragons had been brought to the surface. 3 had died in the initial collapse, but 58 had survived who would have been left to die. News of the rescue spread across Draconis like wildfire. For the first time in recorded history, dragons had risked everything to save those deemed not worth saving. The rescued dragons told everyone who would listen about the story circle, about Scales and his human ideas, about cooperation and compassion. Public opinion began to shift. Younger dragons especially started asking questions. Why did they do things this way? Could there be a better way? What were these human stories that made dragons act so differently? Elder Scorch knew he had lost control of the narrative. The rescue had been too public, too successful, too inspiring. He could not dismiss it or punish those involved without appearing cruel. So he decided on a different approach. He would make an example so severe that no dragon would dare follow Scales again. He would eliminate the problem at its source. The summons came at dawn. Elder Scorch declared Scales and the entire story circle enemies of dragon culture. Arrest warrants were issued across all dragon territories. The charges were serious and unprecedented. Cultural contamination, ideological corruption, and threatening the fundamental structure of dragon society. Scales stood in the central plaza of the Integration Center, surrounded by enforcement dragons. The story. Circle members were being rounded up, their wings bound with metal chains. Fang struggled against his captors, earning a brutal strike that left him bleeding. "Stop fighting," Scales called to his friend. "Save your strength." A crowd had gathered. Hundreds of dragons, maybe thousands, watching from carved balconies and mountain ledges. News of the arrest had spread quickly, and everyone wanted to see what would happen to the revolutionary who dared challenge tradition. Elder Scorch emerged from the council chamber, flanked by 6 ancient dragons who made up the ruling elders. They moved with deliberate slowness, making sure everyone understood the weight of this moment. "Scales, called the human-touched," Scorch's voice boomed across the plaza. "You and your followers stand accused of crimes against our civilization. You have poisoned young minds with alien philosophies. You have undermined the natural order that has sustained our species for 100,000 years. How do you answer these charges?" "Guilty," Scales said clearly. "I taught dragons that there is more than one way to be strong, that helping others does not make you weak, that compassion is not the same as cowardice. If those are crimes, then yes, I am guilty." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some angry, some thoughtful, some confused. Scorch continued, "For these crimes, you will undergo cultural re-education. Your mind will be cleansed of human contamination. You will forget their stories, their weak moralities, their pathetic values. You will become a proper dragon again." "No," Scales said simply. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Scorch's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You refuse correction." "I refuse to forget who I am. I refuse to pretend that strength only comes from dominance. I refuse to believe that an entire civilization should be based on the suffering of those who are different or weak." "Then you choose death." Scorch raised his wing, and enforcement dragons moved forward with weapons designed to kill their own kind. It was rare, almost unheard of, but the law allowed execution for those who threatened dragon society itself. That was when Fang broke free from his captors. Despite his bound wings, he threw himself between Scales and the approaching enforcers. Other Story Circle members did the same, creating a living barrier around their leader. "If you kill him, you kill us all," Fang shouted. "We will not let you murder a dragon who saved 61 lives, while you were willing to let them die." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Many had been at the mining site, many had seen the rescue. The contrast was sharp and uncomfortable. Scorch was about to give the order to kill them all when a new voice rang out across the plaza. "Stop this immediately." Amelia Grant pushed through the crowd, with Lily right behind her. Now 16 years old, Lily had grown into a confident young woman who looked at the assembled dragons without fear. Behind them came Galactic Council mediators, their authority represented by ceremonial staffs that glowed with official power. "This is an internal dragon matter," Scorch growled. "Humans have no authority here." "The Galactic Council has authority everywhere," one mediator stated. "And we received a petition signed by 3,000 dragons requesting intervention. They claim this is not justice but persecution." 3,000. The number hit like a physical blow. That meant the movement had spread far beyond the 24 in the Story Circle. It meant ordinary dragons all across Draconis had been influenced by the stories and ideas Scales shared. Lily walked straight up to Elder Scorch, ignoring the danger. She was so small compared to him, so fragile, but her voice did not shake. "You are afraid," she said clearly. "Not of Scales, not of stories. You are afraid that if dragons learn there is another way to live, they will choose it over your way. You are afraid of losing control." "Silence, human child." "Why, because I am speaking truth?" Lily turned to address the crowd. "My family raised Scales from an egg. We taught him human stories, yes, stories about kindness and courage and standing up for what is right. And you know what? He became the best dragon here, strong enough to save 61 lives that you threw away. Brave enough to stand against you even when it means his death. Noble enough to protect the weak instead of crushing them." Scales found his voice. "Elder Scorch, you say I threaten dragon civilization, but what I threaten is stagnation. For 100,000 years, you have been doing the same things, thinking the same thoughts, building the same structures. You have been so proud of your strength that you forgot strength has many forms." He spread his wings as far as the plaza would allow. "Humans are physically weak. Their lifespans are brief, their claws are dull, and their scales non-existent. By our standards, they should have perished from the galaxy long ago. But they thrive. They build civilizations that rival ours. They achieve things we never imagined. Do you know why? Because they learned that cooperation is stronger than competition. That protecting the weak builds a stronger society than abandoning them. That different ideas make you grow instead of threatening you. The crowd was completely silent now. Every dragon was listening. I am not asking you to stop being dragons, Scales continued. I am asking you to become better dragons, to take our strength and pair it with wisdom, to take our pride and pair it with compassion, to take our power and use it to protect instead of dominate. The stories I shared were not meant to make us weak. They were meant to make us complete. Elder Scorch looked at the crowd, at the mediators, at the 3,000 signatures, and saw his authority crumbling around him. The vote took 3 days to organize and another week to complete. Every adult dragon on Draconis was required to participate. The question was simple but carried enormous weight. Should dragon culture embrace new philosophies of cooperation and compassion alongside traditional values of strength and dominance? Scales and the Story Circle remained under house arrest during the voting period, confined to their quarters but not imprisoned. The Galactic Council mediators ensured they were treated fairly and given food and medical attention. Fang's injuries from his beating were properly healed. The results came in slowly, region by region, clan by clan. The dragon homeworld had not seen this kind of political engagement in centuries. Everyone had an opinion. Arguments filled the public forums. Younger dragons tended to support the change. Older dragons, especially those in power, largely opposed it. The final count was announced in the same plaza where Scales had nearly been executed. The reformers won, but barely, 51% to 49%. Dragon civilization would change, but only by the slimmest of margins. Elder Scorch and the traditional leadership were removed from power through a peaceful transition that surprised even the Galactic Council. The old elders did not fight or resist. They simply stepped down, though Scorch's final words were bitter and warning. You are making a mistake that will echo through generations, mark my words. Scales was appointed as the first Bridge Elder, a new position created to facilitate cultural exchange between dragons and other species, particularly humans. It was a role without historical precedent, and many dragons watched skeptically to see what he would do with this unprecedented authority. His first act was to establish formal educational programs. Human stories and philosophies would be taught alongside dragon history, not to replace tradition, but to complement it. Young dragons would learn about conquest and competition, but also about cooperation and compassion. They would study the ancient dragon ways, but also explore new possibilities. Fang, despite his scars and his history as an outcast, was given a role that seemed impossible in the old system. He founded the first dragon orphanage, a place specifically designed to care for abandoned eggs and weak hatchlings who would have been left to die under the previous regime. It was staffed entirely by volunteers from the Story Circle, dragons who had learned that protecting the vulnerable was a strength, not a weakness. The changes came slowly, like water wearing down stone. Dragon society began to shift in ways both subtle and profound. Hierarchies became less rigid. Competition was still valued, but so was collaboration. Dragons started forming partnerships and friendships based on mutual respect rather than just dominance and submission. New technologies emerged as dragons began sharing knowledge instead of hoarding it. Art flourished as creativity was no longer seen as a waste of time and energy. Dragons began engaging with other species as equals rather than subjects, forming alliances and friendships across the galaxy. Not everyone was happy. The 49% who had voted against change watched these developments with resentment and sometimes outright hostility. There were incidents, conflicts, even a few small uprisings, but the violence that many feared never materialized on a large scale. The new system held, fragile but growing stronger each year. 20 years later, Amelia returned to Draconis. She was elderly now, her hair white and her movements slower than Scales remembered. But her eyes still held the same kindness that had saved an abandoned egg all those years ago. Lily came with her, now a grown woman with children of her own. She had become a diplomat specializing in interspecies. Relations, following in the path Scales had helped create. They arrived for a ceremony celebrating 2 decades of the reformed dragon culture. The central plaza had been transformed. Where Scales had once nearly been executed, there now stood a monument. It depicted a human child reading to a dragon hatchling, commemorating the moment everything changed. Scales met them at the landing platform, and despite his enormous size and the dignified position he now held, he lowered his head so Amelia could rest her hand on his snout, just like she had when he was small. "Look at what you built," she said softly. "I never imagined that one abandoned egg could transform an entire civilization." "You gave me more than rescue," Scales replied. "You gave me stories. You taught me that there are many ways to be strong." The ceremony that evening was attended by thousands. Young dragons performed a play based on the tale of the mouse and the lion, the first story Lily had whispered to Scales in secret all those years ago. The irony was not lost on anyone. What was once forbidden was now celebrated. After the official events, Scales and Amelia sat together on a mountain ledge overlooking the transformed dragon cities. The architecture had changed, becoming more open and welcoming. Spaces existed now for gathering and learning, not just for displays of dominance. "The old guard still complains," Scales admitted. "They say we have achieved more progress in 20 years than in the previous 1,000, but they do not see it as progress. They see it as corruption." Amelia smiled. "Every revolution has its critics. The question is whether the benefits outweigh the costs." Below them, a group of young dragons flew in formation with their human instructors, learning techniques for coordinated rescue operations. A dragon healer worked in a clinic treating both dragons and aliens, something that would have been unthinkable before. Mixed species research teams collaborated on projects that benefited everyone. "I think we have our answer," Scales said. Lily joined them, carrying her youngest child, a 3-year-old boy who stared at Scales with wide, amazed eyes. She sat down and opened a book. "Scales, would you mind if I read to my son? I thought maybe you could listen too, like old times." "I would be honored." As the sun set over Draconis, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, Lily began to read. It was a new story written by a dragon author about courage and kindness and the strength found in helping others. The words were different, but the message was the same as those whispered stories from so long ago. The best stories, Scales thought, always teach us not what we are, but what we could become. And sometimes, if we are very fortunate, they give us the courage to actually become it.